Welcome to Heathen Talk, your favorite heathen podcast. If I don't sound like Josh, that's because I'm not. It is Ladies' Night once again on Heathen Talk, and tonight is our Ladies' Night 2, Midwest Boogaloo, where we have three amazing Midwest heathens with us to talk about, kind of our experiences here in the middle of the country. And for the first time ever, the podcast is running on Central Time Zone. There's none of these hipsterland people on the air. It's just the good middle of the country people. So, before we get started, I want to let you guys know we have a huge thing for you guys, and that is we have been able to release an edition of the infamous, really kind of is, bloat shirt by Brian Smith. And we've got the information for that on the website at heathentalk.com, but we've got it out there. It's awesome. It's $15, and you can get the instructions on how to bloat shirt, which is in IKEA form. 3 simple steps, plus visual proof that bloat does not involve human sacrifice. If you're a Patreon subscriber, check your email after the show tonight. Josh is going to be sending out a link, and you will get 25% off your order of that shirt between now and the 14th of February. So, God, you have no excuse not to buy one, really. So check your email. If you are not a Patreon subscriber or a supporter, you can go to heathentalk.com, click on the Patreon link in the top, and help us out. There's lots of other perks. You get early access to our new series that's going to be starting up here in a couple of weeks, 5-minute Havamal. You get the audio Havamal as well when Josh finishes it, and he's not here to defend himself. And also it's just really what kind of helps us pay the bills, keep the lights on, and keep this show going. So once again, heathentalk.com. Also, since Torin's not here, I'll say go like us on all our social media things, Facebook, review us, all the plugs. I'm just going to get those out of the way so we can get in with the actual, meat of the episode, which I'm really excited because, most of the time, a lot of the times, I've never met a lot of our guests face to face, but 2 of our guests I've actually met at Midwest Wintermoot, and the first one is Destiny Ballard, and Destiny I've known by reputation for a long time because we seem to have all of the same friends. So I finally did get to meet her this past year. She is the Gaitha of Bifrostway Kindred. She also runs, organizes, and keeps up with Midwest Wintermoot, which is, in my opinion, probably one of the best heathen gatherings that there is out here this direction. But I might be biased a little bit.
I agree.
We really enjoyed coming, and I really enjoyed bragging about it for several weeks. Also, Shawna Jones with us. She is the host of the Across the Hedge podcast. She is a member of Yarmender Kindred, and she is the current law speaker for the Midwest. Yarnsmitter, sorry. This is what happens when you let the blind girl try to read things. And then I have Ashley Adams with us. She is the steer of Hawkshelm Kindred and the administrator for Michigan Heathens. And
Heathen Michigan.
Heathen Michigan. So this is what, I really need to pay attention more. But really, really excited to have all of you here with us. And then also Ashley is the proprietor of Clanswoman Crafts, which was one of, and Shawna too, they were both participants in this year's Yule Marketplace, which we really appreciate.
Thank you.
So, guys, tonight we are toasting a very special heathen Midwestern woman. She is a friend of mine, and probably, I know a friend of Destiny's and Shawna's. I don't know if Ashley knows her, but
not personally.
Her name is Tanya Peterson. She is a member of the Trost High Reed and has been a godwoman for many years. However, the reason she's being toasted tonight is because she is probably the queen of festival kitchens. If you want a festival kitchen to run well on time and have everyone leaving talking about it's the best food they ever had, you get her. she's just phenomenal, a phenomenally talented chef, and a phenomenally talented organizer, and just an all-around pretty awesome person. And she was greatly missed this past year at Midwest Winter Moot, so I'm really hoping she'll be back. Plus, I'm a little biased because we have her currently in my neck of the woods. We have temporary custody of her until we send her back to her kindred. So, to Tanya.
Hail.
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 So, folks, what are we drinking tonight? Anybody drinking anything interesting and special?
I'm drinking whatever was in my fridge.
Water. Yeah. I'm not currently drinking. No alcohol for me.
Yeah, I have a Zevia.
Thank you.
Yay! I have a Zevia root beer because
all right.
yeah, that's as good as it gets here. So yeah, we're real exciting here.
Wow,
So,
it is.
Oh, it is. It's wild and crazy. So I kind of want to start out talking about what kind of makes Midwest Heathenry unique. And I know that while there is a pretty decent, regional variance, and although I will say, full disclosure, because I know you're going to listen to this, Ben, Arkansas is not technically part of the Midwest. We are Midwest adjacent. What do you guys really think kind of defines and makes Midwest Heathenry unique compared to, say, what's going on the East Coast or the West Coast or other places that aren't as awesome as the Midwest?
Well, my perspective.
No, you go ahead, Shawna. Sorry.
Oh, okay. We tend to be really tight-knit. We all get together at one another's houses pretty frequently. And if you can't physically travel to be at someone's house, you have a stop in between of a family or kindred that physically travels to be at their house. So we don't have a lot of online infighting. Actually, we very rarely talk online. It's almost all phone calls or, over breakfast because somebody made it through town and needed a place to crash. So we spend a lot of in-person time together, even spanning 6 states. I can say that, all the kindreds and people I'm friends with up and down the Midwest, they've all slept at my house. So I know them well. They know us well. It's very close.
You fed us well. You always feed us well. For me, I would have to agree with Shawna just on the level of intimacy and closeness. There tend to be more working family groups as well. I'm originally from the East Coast. I'm from New York City. I was not practicing heathenry. While I lived there, I moved to the Midwest in 2001. So I've been here a while. I've been fully acclimated. I eat white gravy and say y'all. So, but I would have to agree. It's the relationships. When I was in the pagan community out east, there were larger events where we got together and we kind of saw each other, but pretty much whatever group you were working in was where you were isolated to. And here, outside of the events that other kindreds or groups have, I do get that time to really be social and build those bonds, and our kids get to also. So that's been the significant difference for me. Also, we're kind of more of a melting pot, even though there's a lot of stereotypes about the Midwest, but a lot of people come from other places and settle here. So you get a good mix of folks and backgrounds.
Yeah, I think that it's, at least in Michigan, I think it is very, very diverse. It's very close-knit. And I also would say that we don't tend to form a lot of these really, really big organizations, and they don't have as large of a presence here. We tend to focus more towards the smaller units, the kindreds, the hearths, and even my statewide organization only has 30 people in it. So it's definitely, I think, smaller in scale.
Yeah, I think that's reflective when you get over towards the Ozarks as well. Our kindred right now has has, a couple of people that are considering, and then like 4 members because we're small, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I know, to pick on you for a second, Destiny, like even intentionally with things like Midwest Winter Moot, you guys are setting caps on how many people can come because you don't want it to turn into, 1 million people, and then you lose. I think you lose something when you have those great big huge groups.
I think you lose something, but also the fact of the matter is while we have a casual, what's been dubbed a folk sumble, we have sumble, and we also have a bloat. And I don't want more than a separation of one person that I trust between me and anyone who's going to be around that horn or around that sacrifice. So outside of just wanting to keep it intimate and less stressful, the more we thought about what we were doing publicly, the more important it became that, we really had the people who were we were mixing our weird with and putting their luck into our well, our shared well. We want to know them. So that kind of went into the decision as well.
Yeah, and the Midwest is like every other region. There are also some people that you don't necessarily want at your gatherings because they are not good people. And that's just life, though. And I've heard a lot about, this, that, and the other recently, but the truth of the matter is that that's just life. I mean, there are going to be people you don't like. I mean, there is a guy I know very personally who he's heathen. I see him almost every day. I would not share a horn with him if you paid me.
Wow.
And he knows this. I mean, I'm not saying anything I wouldn't say to his face. Because we are so so different in our core values that it's just, it wouldn't be something that I would ever feel comfortable with. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but at the same time, because we are, I think sometimes it's something, living in the middle part of the country, or as they call it, flyover country, or there's a lot of derisive nicknames for it. I think also we get painted sometimes with a lot of stereotypes that aren't necessarily acceptable or true. I know that there's a huge thought that the majority of heathens that live in the middle of the country are Odinists, racists, dumb, uneducated. I've heard a lot of it, actually.
Well, I'm sorry, but all stereotypes have a kernel of truth.
Yeah. But to be fair, Americans, I don't know.
Yeah.
Around here, we do some serious boundary policing because I'd say 9 out of the 10 idiots we meet are racist, Odinist, white power boneheads, and we just have to kick them to the curb and be like, dude, you can't fucking call me sister because I'm wearing a hammer. You're an idiot. Screw off. But that's just the way we are.
Yeah, I'm the litmus test when we meet people publicly. So when I walk in, it depends on usually we know pretty soon by their facial expressions, they're just like, or something like that. Then, or if my daughter has a girlfriend and they're like, oh, what's going on there? Then it kind of, it lays itself bare, as it were. Yeah. And we've had to say to those people, sorry, don't think this is going to work out. The most interesting one was our kindred brother Brad had a run-in with somebody at our deli, and he noticed Brad's mule near and said something to him, and Brad was like, oh, he was super excited because we live in a pretty small town. And then right after he said something, he immediately spewed something racist, and Brad was like, oh. He was like, oh man. But then he left and he was like, I was kind of grateful that he couldn't hold it in.
I actually can't wear a Mjolnir to school right now because there is another heathen and once again, hi, I know you may listen, who is so radically different, it's kind of like that it's just like, I don't want to wear this to school anymore because I'm afraid people might think I'm, yeah. But and I've had that happen at jobs before where people have seen the Mjolnir and immediately thought, oh my God, are you a racist?
Right.
And it is a problem, but you know what? It's also a problem out on the West Coast. They just pretend like it's not as much. So, but yeah, the boundary policing it can be tough. I know we are running into that more and more here. And of course, we have our own litmus test. They see Mandy and they're like, not to work too much.
Right.
Yeah, because you would have. But I definitely think that I definitely can see, though, a change in the number of people who are not Odinist, white power. Like, it seems to me I'm meeting more and more people who aren't. There are more non... Yeah.
Louder.
I didn't hear you, Shawna.
Yeah.
I said, I just hope we're finally being louder. I've always felt the racist or, the homophobes or whatever people that are apparently scared of something, they are always the vocal minority, and that's what people pay attention to. And so I felt like for several years, I have to stand up and be the vocal majority of, look, we're perfectly normal people, Coming from me, I know that sounds weird, but we fit in
well, I don't
with...
know if normal's the right word, but...
So I think it's important to speak out and be publicly available in that instance and be, the loud, not racist, not homophobic, not sexist, not misogynistic heathen.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Or as I like
completely.
to call it, heathen.
Mm-hmm.
Now to kind of segue off of that statement, how open are you able to be as a heathen where you live?
More or less completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone knows. Actually, for our family, we've been really aided by the Native American community here. We sit in a piece of Oklahoma which is home to 8 separate tribes, and they have a very strong presence. So they kind of paved the way for us. The schools are already on board with not pushing any specific religious agenda and keeping things kind of secular within school to be respectful of Native traditions and also traditions that are alternative to most Abrahamic religions. So they really don't bat an eye at us or our kids. And the one thing that I've learned about moving out to a place that's a lot more rural is people have too much work to do to be worried about what you're doing. So when we're out in the field or we're doing whatever, people aren't really invested in that. It's, are you keeping your property up? Are you being a decent neighbor? The only way that they really get involved in what we're doing or have anything to say is because they're looking out for my kids. Or, they'll warn me if they think something's up on our street or with our property, which are all things I appreciate. So actually going to a place where most people, especially where I was from, would have framed as not a safe environment has turned out to be freaking excellent for us and a really good place for our children to thrive.
I actually get a lot more flack for being openly lesbian than I do for being a heathen, or I have more trouble finding spaces that are accessible to me as a disabled woman than I do encountering hostility because of my religion. I would say definitely.
Like within the heathen sphere, or?
I'm talking about the overculture in general, the Midwest in general.
By the way, you heard that? Overculture? Drink. We have the Heathen Talk drinking game where every time we mention overculture or Cascadia moot, people have to drink. So there were 2 more drinks, guys, if you're playing over at home.
Don't list them all.
Yeah.
So, and actually, I will say that as a disabled woman, I find that is actually even here in, where I would say it's more hostile where I live, and because I guess we're more mid-south,
Mm-hmm.
and I live, in an area where people aren't busy enough and like to get in everybody's business.
Uh-huh.
That I think that, to me, but being disabled is a harder thing, I think, to deal with than necessarily my religious beliefs, as far as just the way people treat me.
Right.
And part of that's just because I don't have to tell people what my religion is. The white cane, it's hard to miss.
Right.
Yeah.
But I've really found that encouraging. And I know, because I hear from a lot of older heathens, there is a level of fear, a level of not wanting to be out and publicly heathen because of fear of losing, and that was, the show topic we had last week, fear of losing, custody of their children or having all these other issues. I think that it is kind of encouraging to hear as time goes on, it's less of a thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We have one of our kindred sisters is still engaged in a big custody issue, and that was one of the very first things that her ex tried to wield against her. And thankfully, the advocates that they had there at the courthouse and the presiding judge, just when they were doing their side negotiations, just all agreed that that was not a factor. It didn't have anything to do with anything. It wasn't something that they were going to consider in the matter of custody anyway, or the well-being of the children. More so, especially because they asked him flat out. They were like, well, is this something new, or is this something you're aware of? And he's like, oh, well, no, I knew it. And they were like, well, did you know when you married her? And yeah. So, he kind of invalidated himself there. But that was terrifying for me. I guess I had to let myself slip into a little bit of, of a naive state there. I really was like, oh, that's silly. This isn't 72 where somebody's going to take your kids away for practicing witchcraft. Yeah, they will.
They will.
So that was an eye opener. But thankfully, I think, like you've said, I'm noticing more of a shift where it's not as taboo as it once was.
Well, I think we're very fortunate at this point in time. There's also a pretty decent body of case law that supports religious freedom, which is important, and I think that eventually that will only benefit everyone, not just this, that, or the other. And oddly enough, one of the case laws I was looking at the other day, because somebody brought this up, for a friend of mine that's Wiccan is having some issues, is the fact that a lot of that case law comes from Orthodox Jews.
Oh.
Where one parent will leave Orthodoxy and then try to use Orthodoxy against the other parent. So, there is some benefit from that and working with those things. So, I kind of, when we were talking about with the stereotypes, I kind of want to get into our next little topic here, which, all of you have been, or either have been in the past or are currently serving in some sort of leadership role, whether that is leading kindred, or in your case, Shawna, as a law speaker, or even organizing events. I really kind of want to talk about those experiences, because I'm just gonna say here, it's a good old boys club sometimes, and to me, sometimes it's hard to get, as a woman, it can be harder to get respect or to accomplish things sometimes because of that kind of network.
It can, until you reestablish the good old boys club with yourself at the center of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's the only system anybody knows, you might as well subvert the system. But I've been in leadership positions, planning events, doing all sorts of things locally and nationally for 20 years now. And I've encountered my share of sexism, and I've also encountered plenty of people who didn't really realize that my gender was female until they met me halfway through the process, and then it was too late. But it depends on what kind of sexism it is and what kind of wall you run up against. I'd say it's not the norm that I've encountered. Most of my kindred and family think that's due to my personality, but usually if I hit something and I think people are just being, jerks or shutting me down simply due to my gender, I make fun of them for it publicly, and it ends pretty quickly. So,
yeah.
Yeah, you definitely, I think any leadership position requires you to have the ability to, one, not take everything too personally, and two, to have the ability to be forthright. So when you're offended or you don't like something or somebody says something, having the capacity to communicate that it's not okay, however you choose to do that. I choose blunt plus blunt, and just let them know, you're being kind of a pig right now. And, and some people I've won over that way. Some people realize that I'm just not their victim, so they move on. But I think being able to express yourself clearly, regardless of gender, is something that's really important. Because I've watched men get run over as well, who are standing, in a room full of other people, and they're trying to talk and express something, and they're just, by other men and even other women, they're just railroaded, and it's because they keep shrinking back from it instead of, butting up against it and kind of holding their ground and saying, no, that's not what I'm about. So I think that's sort of an important personality trait anyway, if you're going to thrive in that kind of role,
Right, exactly. I think that a lot of it has to do with standing your ground and being firm, and, if you are standing up and you're trying to speak and people are not listening, then you speak louder. You don't say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go sit down and come back at another time. You can't really give up in those sort of situations.
Honestly, I found picking your battles is also super important.
Yeah.
Because I'll be completely honest, there are some arguments because they're just, people were, somebody was talking the other day about how hostile and how mean the online heathen community is, and I'm just like, yeah, you just have no real idea, do you? That's cute. Because, I'm to the point now where necessarily that high level of just arguing about everything just doesn't appeal to me anymore. I have a limited amount of energy, and I'm going to pick my battles on the things that are important versus trying to argue every little nitpick topic.
I should have been a lawyer. I'm still on that learning curve. All of my very good friends tell me just stop, but I am the mean. Somebody's wrong on the internet. I mean, that's me. I'm pounding keys and making points, and and even though I know people aren't even probably reading all of that stuff, they're probably just like scroll. I just feel like compelled to say something. I've definitely matured over the years and have gotten a little more selective about my arguments, but part of actually why I pulled out of a leadership position was that I wasn't always, while I'm great at being forthright, I wasn't always the best at diplomacy. So somebody else really needed to take that position within our kindred, and I recognize that about myself. And while I have a limited, I have a limited amount of energy too, like a very limited amount. That almost like sets a fire under me. Like I don't know what psychological thing is going on, but I get a whole lot out of it. I love to argue. I really do.
See, I tend to save mine for the show because then, I save all mine up for the week so that we can, as on our shows, we call it agree aggressively. So what about you, Ashley? What do you think about like picking your battles? I mean, what do you think is in your area are kind of the big battles right now?
I mean, it really depends on the situation, of course. If somebody is being bigoted towards me and they're not hearing me out because of my religion or because of my sexuality or something like that, I'm definitely going to stand up for myself in those situations every single time. But I mean, you can't constantly butt heads with everybody, there are situations where you have to sit back and listen, and there are situations where you have to try and compromise with other people. And then there are other times where you have to stand up and you have to try and inspire, your followers as well. I think that those you being able to read the situation is a little more important than the actual subject content of the situation. If any of that made sense.
Yeah, that does. I do think that it can be very situational. So we have a question from the audience. Shieldmare wants to know, do you feel being heathen as opposed to other pagan faiths means that you're being expected to be less feminine? And Adara adds, or in some cases they're expected to be more traditionally feminine when you're not.
Depends on the crowd.
Yeah. When we first came onto the Midwest Heathen scene, we definitely encountered some groups that had those pressures. My kindred, I'm the only female in my kindred, and we're all very close. We all live together. They're my brothers, have been for 16 years now. And yet, I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, traditionally feminine. I don't do any of the housewife chores. I'm not, one of those people. It's not the role I fall into gendered-wise. And we're all very comfortable with that, but we would get some really weird reactions from other heathens at first until we found the right people. Just that, they would ask my husband permission for things, or we're all blacksmiths, and so, they'd offer to carry the anvil for me and stuff. And it just, it always made me do that weird eyebrow thing where I look at them like, what is wrong with you? Until I figured out where it was coming from, and then I'd be like, oh, no, we don't work like that.
Yeah, I remember specifically, actually, the first craft moot you had, and somebody made an offhand comment at your place, Shawna, and said something like, well, I think they were talking about one of the S-hooks that were up in your kitchen. And they just made an offhand comment like, oh, well, this is a house with 2 blacksmiths. And Shawna was like, well, 3, So, and it was just, just this assumption that that wouldn't be something that she participated in, which was silly. But, it was just kind of, and it wasn't coming from a negative place from that person, but, there is definitely idea of what the guys do and what the women do, And I've caught myself doing it at times. As a matter of fact, another example, Scotty called me out at one of our first troth moots that we hosted in Oklahoma. It was the first evening, and we were getting everybody in to set up the tables. And I stood in the center of the room, and I said, okay, I need all the big, strong guys to come here and help me move the tables. And Scotty said, well, I think you just need some people to come move some tables. And I was like, yeah.
Okay, I need the able-bodied people.
Yeah, I was like, you got me,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think again, it depends on the crowd, and then the more you get to know people and the more they're around you, the more they kind of get in gear with you about, or they move along.
Mhm.
So I don't feel any particular pressure to be either less or more feminine than I already am or am not, personally. But I've seen many group dynamics within Heathenry where there seems to be, it's a very bizarre kind of, I don't know. Uh, I guess for like with a lot of Christians, there's that Madonna whore complex, and in Heathenry, we've got something different where it's kind of like, you know, the Shield Maiden Hearth complex, where you're supposed to be this badass who can make everybody dinner. You know, it's really bizarre. You know, it's like you're the beholder of all the feminine mysteries, you know, and then, you know, but they want you to wear your chainmail bikini. So I think that's sort
Right.
of, I just think that's old stuff being sort of imported into what we do, you know?
Yeah,
Well,
I
we
agree
won't go off
completely.
on the weird men's rights movements and the reactions of the '60s and the birth of heathenry in the '70s and how it
Yeah.
affected. Yeah.
And I think that yeah. I do kind of wonder that, I think when I came into heathenry about 15 years ago, in the early 2000s, it seemed like I felt more pressure to be not the kind to be more stereotypically feminine. And that was partially my own doing just as much as, you know, outside pressure. And I think I have found that I don't know how if you guys have experienced the same thing where we as women sometimes I feel like in the greater society and in heathenry sometimes we can be our own worst enemy with that stuff
Yeah.
as
Well,
far as pressure.
we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. I think get ready to drink in the overculture. There's there's definitely there's definitely pressure, which leads to a lot of, I guess, what you would call gendered infighting amongst women. We feel need to be competitive with one another, and so we kind of tear each other down. But we also tear ourselves down. We're very hypercritical of ourselves.
Yes.
It's a woman is more likely to insult herself than compliment herself, or reveal to you a weakness rather than a strength, and to apologize for success. And
Oh,
you know what I mean? And yeah. And so that it comes in. I mean, I think it's still such a part of our broader culture that it's, even as heathens, it still lives in us, and you know, we still do that to each other. And I've definitely been in places where, you know, you've got another woman leading or something, and you've got what I like to call the bevy of bitches who are snickering and pointing and gossiping, you know,
Right.
about what she's doing wrong, or how she looks, or, you know, she's only getting to do this because she's sleeping with so and so, or my absolute favorite, you're only heathen because your partner is, you know, which drives me up a wall, you know, but yeah.
And I think that is important just in general with women, that we try to get out of that very competitive. I think that's a good word for it, because I think a lot of times and let me tell you what, I am just as guilty with the if you don't have something nice to say, come sit next to me behavior. But
Gotcha.
yeah, but as I've matured, I've really have tried to get away from a lot of that. So, I think something as women, and not just heathen women, just women, that's something that I hope that we're able to instill in future generations. And to say, hey, it doesn't have to be like this. You can work together. You don't have to be in competition with each other. Because sometimes I feel like, yeah, I do feel like sometimes there is almost some expected competition. Who can be the best hostess? Oh God, that's such a okay. I don't know if that's more Southern. Holy crap! The pressure is real, guys. The struggle is real with the whole I get our hostess your ass.
It's all about who's got the best casserole.
Yes.
Yeah. I have bragged about my casseroles on one too many occasions.
Oh, and heaven help you if you show up with something you just bought from the store. Oh, honey.
No.
No, you take it out of the package and you put it on your own plate. And you take it.
That's even worse. That's like lying about it. Yeah, there's that pressure here, too.
And the only time that's ever acceptable around here is if you get really good fried chicken from somewhere. Then it's okay because it's fried chicken. But yeah, I mean, there is I sometimes feel like there is a lot of pressure because there's this cultural pressure to be a good hostess from being in kind of this Midwest, Southern, the middle of the country genre, and then you put on top of it that there's this pressure to be a good host because you're heathen, and it can drive you crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're feeders too. That's the other thing.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So there's, I have lost all control of portions. I don't know what they are anymore. I just make a lot of everything all the time because I don't know who's coming and I know they're hungry. So I have to make too much food. And I come from a family of feeders as it is, so it's not helpful that I've gone into this broader community where it's all about, hosting. And part of being a good host is, keeping people happy and fed. And so my grocery bill has gone up even more than, my kids hitting the teenage years. It's not just them, it's all my friends that come by or come through. I have to keep them fed. And there have definitely been times where I felt a bit of pressure. Tanya, as a long-distance member of our kindred, when she's around, it's great because she does a ridiculous amount of cooking. And while I like to cook, I definitely am not on her skill level, but I do know how to make a lot of stuff. And so, like this year, she wasn't able to join us because of a job change, and so suddenly the kitchen fell to us. And I was panicked because that's one of the things, people will talk about. More even than the ritual sometimes was, did the food suck, And so I was freaking out and messaging her and trying to get an idea of things because I wanted people to be well fed, and I definitely felt that pressure. And then I also felt that pressure because I am not the kitchen lady. I'm just not. I'm not that woman. I make food because I need it to survive, and I make it because it's my turn to make it, and people are getting together, and so I feel obligated and I feel like it's helpful, but I'm not that lady. My husband and my children actually do most of the cooking. So I just I was scared. I was really scared this last year, really afraid of what I was going to do and how it was going to be presented and if people were going to be unhappy,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will tell you this. If you guys go over to the Heathen Talk blog and you look tagged under Winter Mood or Bifrost Way, you will find my review of it. And, you guys did such a great job.
Well,
You
thank
guys,
you.
with the food, and I even wrote about the food, though my focus on it was not the food. My focus was on Stumble that we had, because that was an incredibly moving, wonderful experience. But I mean, you had I not known the whole Tanya thing, I would have never have realized that you guys, it was just, you guys did a really great job and managed the event very well.
Thank you so much.
So that's also my plug again. If you you should go next year if you're in the Midwest, because it's one of my favorite events. And I kind of want to segue. We have a question from Skullgrim that kind of we want to talk about the Midwest scene now, because there's been a pretty big change. And how do you guys feel that Midwestern Heathenry is progressing, or I would even change that to see changing Given the controversy around Lightning Across the Plains cancellation and Jotun's Bane Kindred doing that, because that was the main event in the Midwest for many years.
It was the largest.
Yeah.
It was the largest, and so one that was definitely a strong focal point for everybody, and where Thing had been moved to. Unfortunately, work and health issues kept us from going to Thing this last year, which was sad. But what I was happy about, even though JBK made the decision not to move forward with LATP, and my kids were heartbroken about that, was that Shawna and her kindred still helps facilitate it happening. So the people who were able to make it were still able to get together and do that, which I think was incredibly important. I think what JBK did was for very personal reasons and very important personal reasons, and I think LATP, in my personal opinion, had gotten to a place where it was no longer something positive for them, and they were giving more than they were getting, and not in a good way, you know. So it was draining them resource-wise. It was draining them emotionally. It was tamping down their spiritual practice instead of lifting it up. You had the people who went just to hate, and then you had the people who went just to try and tag on, and you had the people who went to just see people. Everybody had all these different reasons why we went, but there were a lot of excellent things that happened there, and the one thing I do know is the greater majority of people that I do know now in the Midwest, I wouldn't have known if it weren't for that event. So while there's a part of me that's sad that it's gone, I'm glad that it happened. I'm glad that I got the connections out of it that I did. I wish JBK well. I hope whatever they're doing or going to keep doing in the future works for them. It also was another one of the factors that kind of filtered into us making a decision about putting a cap and a restriction on who attends our event and how many attend our event, because I just feel like when things get that large, it's really easy for it to start getting beyond your grasp, you know, on all levels. So, you know, I miss the huge stumbles, but then again, I'm glad to go to bed at a normal time and not freeze.
Yeah, I think that Midwestern Heathenry is growing. I really do. You know, at least here in Michigan, we've had, in the last year, we've had 2 new kindreds in the Flint area start up, including mine. We've had, my organization has had a 30% member increase in the last year, which I think is great. So, I mean, I think that we're definitely going to see a lot more events start popping up, though I'm not sure if we're ever going to see anything that's quite as big a scale as Lightning on the Plains, at least here in the northern Midwest.
I think that, you know, Midwest Heathenry is growing, it's continuing. I think Lightning Across the Plains was a wonderful event, but it was on an expansion arc that was not sustainable. And it hit that point, like Destiny said, where it was no longer serving the kindred, nor was it serving the bulk of the community as it intended to, simply because it had gotten so big. And however, I think that many of us learned a lot of lessons from it to apply to our own events, to apply to many other areas of Midwestern Heathenry. And there's always going to be controversy when anybody steps up to do any sort of leadership role. It's just the nature of humans to be backbiting little bitches, and it's part of the process. So, you know, from one controversy to the next, we hop through the days of our lives. Regardless of that, I think Midwestern Heathenry will continue to grow. We have very solid, firm foundations here, and we have a lot of them. It's not 1 or 2 kindreds that are really strong. It's 100 kindreds that are really strong, that are linked in different ways, that each have our own unique practices, that build the faith out in different areas. We don't all have to get along. We don't all have to do the same thing, and we don't all have to go to one place on one weekend once a year.
Yep.
So
Right.
we are building strength through a diversification, which is an excellent business model. So.
Now, I do want to ask, because you guys did have a thing that we can tell. I haven't actually talked to many people, and I've actually never had an actual good firsthand account of what happened. So, how did that go as far as what you can actually? Yeah, I realize as far
How
as
much do you
attendance and
want
what
me
you
to
can
say
talk about.
publicly?
Well, I'm basically trying to give you talk about how things went and what do your kind of impressions on it and anything interesting.
Well, the first thing I want to say is anything under Shawna is crazy organized. Crazy organized. He's on it. You're going to have your agenda. You're going to have your stuff turned in. You're going to know what you're talking about. We follow the process for meetings, and it's efficient and informative. So since she's been law speaker, I've been thrilled because I know what to expect, and that's important for me.
A woman after my own heart, right there. Yeah, I love organized and efficient.
Well, the first year I went to Thing, I didn't go the previous couple years because they held it at 7 in the morning, and I'm sorry, it's not that important. But the first year I went to Thing, it was disappointing as far as organization and the accomplishment of any goals. And so the next year I was elected law speaker, and so I decided to fix that. But this previous year, we didn't have the turnout we'd hoped. Of course, there was a lot of scheduling involved in that. Lightning was canceled. The minute we knew it was canceled, our kindred got together. It took us about 20 seconds to decide that, yes, I felt responsible to facilitate Thing as a law speaker because I said I'd do it. And then we started the process of calling everybody and making sure that we covered all our bases. This was okay with Gaia, whether we wanted to rent the ridge, all of those logistics. And that took us 3 or 4 days before we got all those logistics together and actually got the news out that, yes, we're going to host Thing. We got all our ducks in a row. And during that time, several people had already made other plans and we're not going to be up there at Gaia that weekend. So unfortunately we didn't have nearly as many people represented as we had hoped, but we still had a pretty good sized group that sat at Thing that morning. I think we accomplished several goals. We finished out the addendums and the powers of the law speaker that were outlined last year. Those were all written into approval. And, of course, we managed to elect the next law speaker and location for the next Midwest Thing, which is, I think, the really important bits to continue it on. So the actual meeting itself was about 30 minutes. And it was a nice, pleasant meeting. There was some other ritual activities and that sort of thing out there that we got together and did. And we had basically 3 camps throughout the ridge. There just weren't enough people to cover the entire ridge. So people kind of got to bounce between the camps and meet different groups of people that did things differently. We definitely sorted ourselves by heathen practice, so to speak.
Well, I'm curious when you say that, what exactly as far as like by practice?
Say publicly. So our camp was our small, tight-knit little Midwest group, plus some friends from Michigan. And we all pretty much, we don't do things exactly the same, but we all assemble well enough that we can do it together. We have similar kindred structures. We have similar ideas about respecting one another, that sort of thing. We all speak the same heathen language. And so we all camped together, and we were by far the biggest contingent there because we were 8, 10 kindreds. And then in another area were people that take up the warrior fighting ethos as far as heathenry goes. That's kind of their thing. They're very much interested in the physical activity and weaponry and that sort of thing. And so they wanted to camp off in their area mainly so they wouldn't throw axes into our camp, which we all appreciated.
That is very considerate.
And then at another area was some groups that are not from the Midwest or part of the Gaia community. And we all butted heads pretty hard over the weekend and continue to do so. So I'll leave it at that.
That's if people aren't butting heads in heathenry, there's something seriously wrong.
I don't think we need to butt heads over core values. I think it's pretty easy to get along with everyone, you know, when they're not breaking some of the basic rules.
Yeah, don't step on people's necks, man. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
As
As we call it, the cardinal rule of religion: don't be a douchebag.
I was going to say, get Newton's law, don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely, I think that kind of comes back to some of the policing that groups have to do. That's like I said, not anything unique to heathenry. It is something that I've seen. It's an issue that I'm very active in the tabletop gaming community, and we have the same kind of issues at gaming conventions, where you have to remind people to shower, and remind people that someone wearing cosplay doesn't mean you can touch them.
Right.
You're just always going to have those people who don't play well with others, and it's how we handle it that can set us apart from other groups.
Right.
So we have another question. So followed up about the question about femininity. This is, why is traditional femininity so bad? It was the head of the home and arguably the most important job you could hold. Yes, men hunted and protected the home, but the wives raised the next generation, teaching and sculpting culture of the future. And it goes on. But yeah, I don't think there's anything bad about traditional femininity. I just don't think that you should have to be held. Just because I was born a female doesn't mean that that's the role I should have to take. That's my personal take on it.
Right. I mean, I don't think that there's anything necessarily bad with it. I do think that heathen women, in particular, are expected to be a bit more practical. And just for example, it's a little hard to, set up a tent in the woods if you're wearing heels, So I
found some heathen women that can do that, and they're impressive.
I would like them to teach me how, please.
Infamous camping maxi dresses. Everybody's always very amused by my choice of wardrobe when I go camping. It does not make sense. But
I was going to say, if you're in the South in the summer and you're camping, maxi dresses are the best thing ever because it's like you're not really wearing pants.
I love them.
It's great.
I wear floor-length skirts almost every single day of my life. They're fantastic, dude.
I own one skirt. I wear it to funerals for my grandparents' level generation. That's it.
And that's the great thing is that all of that is completely okay.
Right.
So, I think a lot of people assume that women who reject traditional femininity and instead adopt what are considered masculine gender roles reject it because they think that traditional femininity on the whole is somehow bad. And as someone who fits that stereotype, someone who adopts more masculine gender roles both in mannerisms, dress, and language, no, I don't think it's bad. I just don't think I'm good at it. I still greatly appreciate the roles and the powers and the strengths that come through traditional femininity, but I also think I should not have to inhabit that space when I do not feel I can do it justice. However, I think there are some men I have met that can inhabit that space wonderfully and do it great justice. So the rejection of a role, even though it would normally be applied to me, does not mean that I find that role inherently lacking or somehow bad, distasteful, or uncomfortable. It simply means that it is not a space where I fit. It doesn't mean I think other people should have to remove themselves from that space simply because I did. I think everybody should get the choice to play with those roles and adopt them how and where they find the most power themselves.
That is a fantastic response.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of like motherhood. I feel no desire towards motherhood. Though, does that mean that I think parents are not important? No. It just means that for me, it's not the place I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, it just to sort of reiterate part of what Shawna said. I think what it's important for me to have other people understand is that I don't consider traditional feminine roles to be weak or lesser than. I just don't fall into all the slots of that category. And for the women and others who do, good on them. But it's not a huge part of who I am. There are places that I do fill those spaces, and there are places where a lot of ways I don't. But I don't think it's inherently bad. I don't think it makes you weak or lesser than anybody else. I think it's just a way of being, and either you are or you are not. And for me, I'm strongly not, more not than I am, But in other ways, I guess I am very much, I fall into that role in certain aspects. I think where we run into a problem is, again, what Shawna was saying, is if you try to force people into one mold or another, that's detrimental for everybody. that's bad news for everybody, and it never works. So I think we should all have learned by now that trying to force people to be something that they're not always backfires. It either ends in tragedy or the falling apart of whatever it is you're trying to enforce.
Right. And there are a lot of different ways that you can be feminine also. Like you don't have to be that stereotypical feminine woman to be a feminine person. And there's definitely power in being feminine, just as there is power in rejecting that femininity for yourself personally, and there is power in taking on those masculine characteristics as well.
I think our overculture definitely emphasizes that feminine is lesser and weaker. I mean, I've talked over, I have two young men who used to be boys but have grown up now, who I've talked about a lot, when it comes to insulting and calling each other names. You can't call somebody a pussy.
Yep.
Right.
Because you're implying that to be effeminate is to be lesser, to use that insult, and so they've had to become more creative in their insults. Which, it seems like a silly thing, but it really makes you think about what we place value on and what we don't, and where we find societal norms and where we find weakness. And it's definitely a challenge swimming upstream in what is a sexist, racist culture. I mean, there, you can't pretend it's not, because it is. And that's going to transfer over into our heathenry, of course, because we're a subculture. We're not a dominant culture. We have to react to the mainstay that we live in. And so, we're going to bump up against those as we all explore gender roles, both individually and collectively. And it's a vast ocean to explore. It's not, do I wear a dress today, or should I put on makeup, or am I going to cook dinner? I mean, it's so much more complex than that. It can't just be, Tuesday I think I'll be female, and Friday I think I'll be male, and it's going to be black and white, cut and dry, and there will be no confusion. It's a bigger spectrum.
I think the other thing is that a lot of what our kind of overculture sees as feminine and masculine tends to line up with the upper middle class to upper class woman in particular time periods. Because let's face it, I come from pretty working class stock, and my family's always worked. I mean, there was none of this, the woman stays home and takes care of the kids and does all of this, they were out in the fields. They were doing, just as much, physical hard labor. And let's be completely honest here, a lot of the stuff that before the convenience of washing machines and all the other lovely things we have, I mean, I don't know how many of you guys ever have had to make butter by hand, but it can take a really long time, and washing clothes by hand, and that's a lot of hard, there was hard physical labor involved pretty much in survival, no matter what role you had in the household.
Well, one of my good friends, she's the most amazing housewife I know, and she's great at it, and let me tell you, there's still a lot of hard physical labor involved in it. She tells me her day when she's been through her cleaning routine, and she's scrubbed the floors and scrubbed the inside of the oven and all sorts of stuff, even with modern conveniences, and I'm just like, wow, I could not do that. I am so glad I have kindred brothers that do such things, because
I'm tired just listening to that.
Oh, me too.
But
oh my.
she's good at it, she loves it, what makes her fulfilled and happy, so
there you go.
It's where she finds her power.
Right.
So yeah, the basically the long and the short of it is, do what's good, do what you're good at, do what makes you happy. Whether that is blacksmithing or fiber arts or cooking or cleaning or whatever. Because I'm not going to lie, I kind of like cleaning. It's become like a thing now because it's so stress relieving for me.
So when are you coming to visit?
Well, it's this pesky thing about driving. Thanks, Obama. They took away my driver's license. And, yeah. It's not
if you clean, I'll come get you.
But so let's talk a little bit about ritual. I've got a question. How do you feel about the ritual role in Symbol when the lady of the house serves mead? By modern standards, it seems misogynistic, but it was a very high honor for older heathens.
I'm going to make some people mad, probably, but that's okay. They can be wrong on the internet at me now. Okay. I don't feel it's misogynistic. I feel you need the right person to do it because they are protecting and shielding the luck of that. I think traditionally, it having been the lady of the house or the person running the household or something like that makes sense. In our kindred, our kindred sister Christine manages that. She's the horn bearer. And the reason why we go with her is because, one, well symbology is feminine, and two, she very much fits that role amongst us. She is also a domestic person, and that is where she finds her strength. And she is the one who really, wherever we are, she has her eye and her pulse on the kids. As a matter of fact, most people aren't even aware a lot of times that she's a member of our kindred, because when she's at events, she's in the kitchen or she's after the children. And the rest of us are a lot more front and center, and they don't really get to see her until she is bearing the horn. But more importantly, more than it just being lady of the house, it's a feminine symbology. And it holds specific feminine power as far as being receiving. So I think it fits for women to have that role. That being said, the part where I'm going to probably piss people off is that I don't think it's tied necessarily to you having a vagina. So it just needs to be the right person for that role. But I do very much feel that it is a feminine one. So you have to have that place of center, I think, when you're doing a symbol by traditional means anyway, to have whomever is protecting and bearing the horn be very centered in that spiritual place of being and in that feminine power, because they're offering up something very holy and sacred and holding all that's put into it and going to be offered up and shared. So for me, whoever is bearing the horn or vessel, it's very important for them to be in that feminine space as an individual to fulfill that role appropriately, at least by Arthu.
Right. I think it would be different if the symbology was, oh, it's a woman and women are inferior, so a woman has to serve. But that's not what it's about. So when you're determining whether or not something is sexist or misogynistic, I think you really have to look at the deeper meaning and why. Why is that a feminine symbology? Why is that a feminine thing? And if that's not sexist, then I don't think that the role is necessarily sexist.
I personally don't necessarily always feel like I am, I'm a woman. Don't always feel like I'm the appropriate person in a feminine space to do that kind of thing, because I just don't have that same aura. Whereas I know men who have that kind of aura. It's just I kind of sometimes hate the labeling of feminine versus masculine energy, but it's really the best language we have for it sometimes. But yeah, I think it's interesting. We got a follow-up question here. How do you feel about gender roles as semiotic language and ritual as a general thing, excuse me? Do you think this is affected by things other than gender, such as age, sexual orientation, or sexual expression?
I think Western esotericism has been done a great disservice by being simplified in the 60s into understanding sexual energy as only masculine and feminine, as it being a relationship for positive and negative receiving ends. So, yeah, that blows. But it is our history, our recent history, and you got to dig deeper and you got to do more research, like with everything else. Read a book or two. But back on the symbol, I think, I know Destiny said it wasn't necessarily linked to having a vagina, but I think it is one of those energies that is easier to understand if you have a womb and you've experienced childbearing. That doesn't mean that you have to have a womb and you have to have experienced childbearing in order to understand the energy, but it sure is a shortcut. So I think, we can layer a ton of symbology and esoteric understanding onto the role of bearing the horn, not just from the sexual aspect of it and the relationship to biology, but also from the aspect that politically women in Heathen times were the urgers of political movements. They were the ones that urged a vengeance debt. They were the ones that pushed their husbands into such things. And in a large symbol, if you're the one choosing who speaks next and who doesn't speak, you are politically manipulating the room in order to achieve the outcome you want. You are literally a frith weaver of getting, Joe Elder over here and Dave whoever over here to finally get along and stop arguing about that stupid hay bale 3 years ago, because by gods, the kids want to get married and you have to push this along. So I think that role for women as the bearer of the cup has a lot of power in it too. And that's a role that anybody who is politically savvy can take on easily if that's the tone of that kind of symbol. In addition to the deeper esoteric sexual tones that we often experience in our own kindreds, because within our own kindreds we're not politically maneuvering one another, but we are, utilizing those larger energies in the process of recreating symbol in our modern context.
That was an excellent point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, not much to add to that because I think you got it all there.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's
Right.
fine. I really enjoy it. I want to one more topic I want to touch on tonight, and that is the next generation of heathen women leaders. And the next generation, how do we as women cultivate this next generation of, people, and not just, and I'm speaking in terms of not just children, and teenagers, but also women in their younger 20s or women who are newer to heathenry. How do we deal with that? How do we cultivate it?
I think the most important thing is be a good example. People do not listen to what you say. They watch what you do. And so if you stand up in front of them and you say that I can do this regardless of what's in my pants, or, I can lead in this manner, I can fulfill this role, I can, serve the gods, I can serve my kindred, I can serve my community, then other women will find that expansiveness and step into those roles and expand them in their own directions, because, I had several people tell me, oh, wow, we've never had a feminine law speaker before, and I was just like, okay. It didn't seem a big deal to me because it never seemed like something I couldn't do. But several people reacted to it as a surprise because they didn't think it was something a woman could do. So as we demonstrate those roles, as we demonstrate those leadership qualities in different ways, the next generation will be able to see that and then expand upon it.
Yeah, going back to one of Shawna's very first statements on here, being the vocal majority. A lot of the groups that I interact with and I deal with, they have women in very strong roles, within their kindreds. They're high functioning, they're deeply spiritual, they're very active in their kindreds and in their communities, and those are great, wonderful examples. My earlier days in heathenry were not as smooth, and unfortunately, like for my oldest daughter and my youngest daughter have had very different experiences within heathenry because of that. My oldest daughter is very reserved about wanting to participate in larger heathen activities, because when she was young, I was rejected for a lot of reasons. Sometimes for gender, sometimes for my melanin content, all kinds of things. And that really turned her off. And she didn't like having to watch me butt up against people constantly. And while she's expressed to me a certain amount of pride in my personal perseverance, it's not something she wants to do. So she's kind of withdrawn from the larger gatherings and stuff like that. She refused to ever go to like LATP. She just wouldn't do it. But my younger daughter, on the other hand, has had a very different experience, and that's because the people I've connected to later on in my heathenry and this larger band of people in the Midwest that we've become acquainted with and friends with, really good friends with, that's not how things go. And she sees a lot of an exchange of mutual respect, and women who are respected and who are very powerful and who do stand up and do things, and she goes, oh, that's something I can do. So I think we need to keep putting ourselves out there, we need to keep being good examples, and we need to keep being inclusive of others who may initially be a little, shy or reluctant to take on these positions, and let them know that it's okay and that they have support.
Exactly. I think that we're very lucky to live in the time that we do, where heathenry is still very young and it's still growing a lot, and we have a lot of opportunity here to really influence things. And I mean, I think you guys are right. We need to make sure that we are having women who are leaders, who are steerswomen, who are law speakers, who are githyas. And, we need to have women who are teaching, literally teaching the younger generation our lore and our myths and all that, all that stuff. It's very, very important that we are visible in the community and that we're loud and outspoken as well. We are still building our community at large as a global heathen community. And we need to make sure that women, just as well as men, are at the forefront and that we're not being pushed to the side. So I think we really have a great opportunity to do that.
I would also add that it's really important that when we talk about, representative leadership and having people be good examples, that we have a diversity of people be these good examples.
Right.
We have traditionally effeminate people be these examples. We have traditionally masculine people. We have people in between. We do not equate gender roles with specific leadership or kindred roles, but allow people to do what they're good at regardless of their own gender expressions and how they interact with those, because that plethora of diversity will empower everyone to step forward into those greater roles as they mature within the community.
Right.
We do have one good question here. Talking about frith weaving, keeping peace within the family and by extension within tribes. What do you guys think the role of women is in handling members of the family or tribe that might behave in a way that reflects badly on the group in a public space, such as losing your cool frequently? I would also add to this list, because it's something I've witnessed at several events, excessive drinking.
Yeah.
But their actions can affect the luck of the group by way of collective or associative reputation.
In our group, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. You go.
In our group, that's everybody's job. That doesn't just fall to the ladies. We focus on each other, and so whoever's acting a fool is gonna get a talking to or a timeout or whatever. It's not just the ladies that do it; it's everybody, and everybody's responsible for everybody else because our luck is tied. So if it's somebody drinking a little too much, or if it's somebody who's being really loud and obnoxious, or somebody whose kid is out of control, we count on each other to call each other on those things and get our behavior back together, not just for how we're presenting ourselves outwardly, but for the continued health of our kindred. It is absolutely necessary that we get onto each other. But for me, I don't think that's a gender-specific thing. I think in the role of horn bearer or cup bearer, it is very specific to that and to sort of maintaining the frith and the grease within the space where you're having symbol or ritual. But beyond that, I don't think it falls necessarily to the women to be sort of to police those situations. I think it's really up to all of us.
Yeah, I think this is not something that falls only to women. In fact, it's an extension of the understanding of frith weaving beyond a point where it makes any sense. Frith weaving and maintaining the grith in symbol context and in ritual context has both masculine and feminine components, and we only addressed one of those. So to extend that over, that women would have a unique role in the maintenance of their own tribe's luck and behavior of their people, it falls over because there's nothing to support it. Everybody does that. If you're looking out for your brother, if you're looking out for your sister, if you're looking out for your kids, you're looking out for your family, and that's how that works.
And I think it's important, that is a very important point, that, we should be within our tribes looking out for everyone. And you should be building a space within that tribe where, if I need to tell you to calm yourself, that's something you're not going to take as like a grave offense.
Right.
You're going to recognize that I'm
Right.
doing this because out of, love, and not because I'm trying to upset you. So, thank you guys so much for being here with me. I've had such a great time. Wanted to give you a chance, Ashley, if you want to talk about the event you have coming up in a couple of weeks.
Sure. My kindred, Hawkham Kindred, is hosting a pub moot. It's going to be in Flint. It's at, hold on one second, because I totally accidentally X'd out of it. It's at a brewery in Flint that I cannot remember off the top of my head. I'm posting the event link in the IRC chat right now. All the information's there. I believe it is also on the event page on the heathentalk.com.
Yes.
So you can get all the information there. It's open to the public. Anyone who would like to come is welcome to come. You do not have to be heathen to come. If you're interested in heathenry, you're also welcome to be there. And I will be there. My kinswomen will also be there. And hopefully some other kindreds will make an appearance too.
That sounds really good. And hopefully you will get a lot of people coming, in spite of the reputation the city of Flint has right now.
Well, we're
That's
not
okay.
gathering to drink water, just beer.
Exactly. That's what they're drinking beer. They're all right.
Oh, I feel awful for even laughing. Oh my gosh.
Everybody keeps joking about it around here.
And we have the early information up already for your event coming up in the fall, Destiny, with Midwest Winter Moot. And if people want to go to your website, which is byfreshway.org, which it's also linked on the event page, everybody should just go to Heathen Talk all the time, but they can get more information there, and that'll be updated as you guys have more information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, registrations are open, but more information about what themed rituals we'll be doing and kind of the events and who we'll have as guests will be put up as well. And then obviously as we get closer, menus, weather information, and so forth. But I do want to stress again that we have a cap, an absolute cap of 85 people this year. So the event keeps growing year by year. So it's tax time. I strongly encourage you to register as soon as possible if you intend on going.
Yeah, that's our plan with our kindred down here. We're already, and also this year we'll know how to turn the heat on. Unlike last year when we all slept with the AC on all night. Oh goodness! And if you don't mind telling us a little bit about your podcast, Shawna, and where people can find that.
It's at acrossthehedge.com. And it's a new podcast. It's been in the dreaming stage for quite a while, but it focuses on modern heathen living with a specific slant towards homemakers. So every episode includes recipes, and every other week is story time, where we kind of put on an audio play like they did back in the 30s. So we tell traditional folk tales with sound effects and voices and that sort of thing, so you can listen to those with your kids. And then on other weeks, we have some serious discussions of topics related to modern heathenry, along with information on herbs, information about divination and meditation practices, some humor, which is usually off color. Anybody that knows me knows I talk like a sailor, but I keep that out of the story time, I promise. And so I hope you'll give it a listen and give us some feedback on how you enjoy it.
Yeah, we have to limit the amount of times that we can say fuck on this show to keep our rating on iTunes. So I hear you. I hear you. It's actually the first time. I want you to know, guys, that we went an hour and 29 minutes before the first F1 was dropped tonight. So it happens when Tori's not here. So once again, guys, thank you so much for being here with us. I've really enjoyed this chance to visit with you guys and hope to have all of you back on for various other things pretty soon. Don't forget to go to our website, heathentalk.com. We'll have links up with the show information. There's our old podcast. You can listen to Ladies Night 1, which featured Diana Paxson and Avidar and Scotty Snook and any of our other awesome podcasts. Next week, we are doing Weird, Beyond the Basics, so you'll want to be here for that, and the guys will be back with me next week, so you will be able to be exposed to the glory that is Torrin as magic. Patreon listeners, check your inbox. You've got a special link, and that's all. And remember, folks, you're not the boss of me. You're doing it wrong. Everybody have a great week.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.